Done.
This is Spectrum 360. Spectrum 360 is political talk and humor for Tampa Bay, and we hope to be covering many other things such as music and the arts and entertainment and even popular culture. Your hosts are Mark Skogman, myself here, and Bruce Wright. Bruce Wright, say hello.
Hello, radio audience.
And this is our first program for Spectrum 360, and as a treat for our radio audience, we are going to be limiting the commercial interruptions tonight. So we have limited commercial interruptions throughout the program. And we are going to go right into an interview here briefly. We just want to talk about what we're doing and why and when we're going to be on. Spectrum 360 is a weekly radio program that's going to be on Monday evenings, every Monday evening at 11 p.m. on WTAN and their sister stations as well. And this is political talk and humor from a progressive point of view with your hosts, Mark Skogman and Bruce Wright. So that's what we're doing. We're very excited about the first program. And as I said, as a treat to our listeners, we have limited commercial interruption tonight. And we're going to go right into our first interview. We like content on this program.
Yes, definitely.
I would like to just mention one thing. Just in the last month alone, the staff of Spectrum 360 has been out in the field getting ready to do this first program. We've put over 5,000 ground miles on getting content for this program and the coming program. So we're working very hard to bring you the best we can in political talk and humor. And Bruce has a number of announcements and acknowledgments that he wants to state about the people that are supporting this program. Bruce, take it away.
Yes, Mark, thank you so much. We're so excited about being on the air here, and I do want to give a special shout out to some organizations and individuals that have been involved in helping put this show together and support it through this period of time.
An organization.
An organization, yes.
You want to change your situation, you got to join an organization.
Anyway, we'd like to thank the following organizations. The Refuge, who can be reached at 727-278-1547. The Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, economichumanrights.org. Veterans for Peace, Chapter 119 in St. Petersburg. Check them out on Facebook.
And I'd like to just acknowledge two people that are connected with Chapter 119 specifically, and that is the president of the chapter, Don McKeating, and also Michael Fox, who's a member of Chapter 119. They both instrumental in initial support to get this program started and continuing. And we very much appreciate the support from those two gentlemen, as well as the entire chapter, Chapter 119.
Absolutely. And we want to give a special shout out to a brand new coffee house in the area called Gennaro's Coffee House.
Yes.
1047 Central Avenue in beautiful downtown St. Pete.
Yes.
You can call them at 727-202-6956. Every Monday night, St. Pete for Peace hosts documentary films there at 8 o'clock. And then every Saturday, one of the best poetry nights in the Bay Area with Mona Lisa every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. We also want to thank Relax at Home licensed massage therapists. You can call Patricia if you're interested in massage therapy, some of the best you could ever get.
I'm relaxed already.
813-784-7485. That's how you can reach her, 813-784-7485. My Place in Recovery, which is a new recovery program, 727-244-0427. The Catholic Worker in St. Petersburg, and the League of Revolutionaries for a New America. That's LRNA.org, which you'll hear a little bit more about them with one of our main interviewees, later in the evening. But without further ado, we do have some things we want to talk about. So, Mark, what's up?
Well, I'm aware that you participated within just a few days ago, last week, in a local fast food workers strike. And I'd like you to speak about that and give us the details on what happened that day. This is a growing movement that's across the country. I believe this is either second or third major nationwide day where there's been many fast food worker strikes across the nation, and it seems to be spreading and getting bigger each time, starting in New York City and some of the major cities, but now here in Tampa Bay as well. And I know you attended that demonstration and had a perspective on it, and I'd like you to just take it away and give us some details on exactly what happened then.
Yes, Mark, it was a very exciting event. In fact, it was historic. As many people know, Florida is a right-to-work state. I like to call it a fire-at-will state, but anyway, it is a so-called right-to-work state. And for there to be any kind of organizing with fast food workers, it is a very, very difficult thing to happen. Although, according to federal law, every single worker in this country is allowed to do a one-day walkout and not get fired for it. Well, we had a fast food workers walkout last Thursday in Tampa, and we had it on Fowler Avenue in front of a number of fast food restaurants, and quite well attended, as well as covered not only by local media, but the BBC and Bloomberg as well. And it was very exciting. And again, this was a rare kind of thing.
I just wanted to make a brief comment about Bloomberg. Bloomberg is actually business news, so it's rather interesting that Bloomberg would be covering this, because they must be covering it from a business aspect, because they're a business news service. That's interesting. Yeah,
it was very interesting when I did the call with them, and you know, they had I had the chance to talk to them as well as the BBC. And what's amazing about this whole fast food worker strike is that it's happening at all, even in the Northeast and Midwest. But the fact that it's beginning to spread to the South, there was one in Atlanta and a few other cities in the South. Tampa actually was the only one in Florida. So it was very, very historic that it happened. And again, as people may or may not be aware, fast food workers that work at fast food places, obviously, such as McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, and so forth, are some of the lowest paid workers in the entire country. What they're asking for is really, and this is historic because it happened the day after the commemoration of the I Have a Dream speech. We'll talk more about that later. But the 50th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech, which was originally and still is recognized as a march for jobs and freedom. And one of the demands was $2 an hour, if you can picture that, in 1963. But that was a living wage in 1963.
Well, that's actually what the actual name of the original 1963 march was. It was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And the 50th anniversary celebration, which Bruce and I attended last week in Washington, D.C., that was a recreation of that. It was a commemoration of the 50th anniversary, and then a recreation of that exact march with that same exact title. It was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom.
Absolutely.
So here we are 50 years later.
Here we are 50 years
trying to find jobs and get freedom.
Exactly. And what's interesting about this is that it happened, the fast food workers walkout happened the day after the famous I Have a Dream speech and the actual March for Jobs and Freedom. And what they're demanding is the same wage adjusted for inflation that they demanded in 1963. And when I say same wage, I'm obviously not talking about $2 an hour. But adjusted for inflation, that would be $15 an hour. Now, many may say that sounds crazy, but the reality is that most fast food workers, if not all, are not the traditional age of teenagers. These are young adults. These are older adults. These are families. These are single-parent families. And they cannot survive on the wage they're paid at these fast food restaurants. So this strike, if you will, this walkout is historic because it featured that kind of milieu, that kind of situation in which it happened. And so we were excited to be there. It happened all over the country in major cities as well as New York City, Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, cities all around, 60 cities actually. And further events are going to be planned. And we're just uniting with their call for a living wage so that people can afford to take care of their families.
I'd like to make a quick point also in terms of the minimum wage. When the minimum wage was started in the 60s, it basically has not been, my understanding is it has not been indexed properly for inflation. And that should have been actually written into the law that provided the minimum wage so it would stay current with the current economic conditions, but it hasn't. And it's actually, now the minimum wage is actually way lower than it was in the 60s because of the fact that there hasn't been a cost of living adjustment for inflation. So in effect, the wage has gone down and down and down and down because it isn't indexed properly. And the important point of this is I listen to people that have this argument that say, oh, we can't pay people $10 or $15 an hour or raise these minimum wage jobs to a higher rate, and yet the minimum wage was higher before and the businesses were successful. So why can't they be successful now, raising it up to what would have been in 1967 dollars, what that would be today? And I believe, that speaking to some labor activists, that's in the range of $10 to $15 an hour. If you could do it then, we can do it now. Absolutely,
we can do it. That sounds like a familiar phrase there. But, you know, the situation is that with these low-wage workers, they really are not only facing the situation of not getting fair pay, but they don't get health insurance. Frequently, they don't get a 40-hour work week. In fact, they do that often in the fast food business in order to not have to pay them health care. So there's a whole range of issues involved in this. And by the way, this organizing of fast food workers was a self-organized thing that began with the fast food workers themselves. Mm-hmm. But since then, a number of unions, including in Florida, the AFL-CIO, the Central Florida Labor Council, and SEIU have become a part of it, as well as organizations such as the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign and Progressive Democrats of America and a whole range of other groups. And we're really excited to see this movement come here, and you can expect to hear more in the future from us about that. We'll be covering it from time to time, but also at some point we expect to have some low-wage workers in the future coming in and hopefully sharing on the air, and they may have to do it anonymously, but we want to hear from them. The fact is there's been a lot of intimidation with this. So, yeah, that was an exciting thing. You know, also in the news, I wanted to bring up, too, just real briefly, because you can't ignore it, is the whole Syria situation. And, you know, we're in a very precarious kind of situation, as most people know right now, because President Obama is pushing for us to take some action, even though there has not been any verified information about who actually did the supposed use of chemical weapons. Of course, our government's blaming Assad and his government and military, but it's a very dubious kind of situation. It reminds me a lot of the build-up to the war in Iraq and the justification used for that. And so you'll be hearing more about that, obviously, and other things, including the whole NSA thing with Snowden.
Yeah, I have a comment on that as well. Now, I haven't been able to research this to confirm this, but it's my understanding that Keith Olbermann posted on the internet, and I don't know if this was Facebook or some other source on the internet, but Keith Olbermann himself posted a link to an article where there was an interview by a reporter of rebels, and they were stating that the chemical weapons usage was actually by the rebels. It was actually accidental, and it was chemical weapons that was provided by Saudi Arabia that they did not know how to use. Now, I don't know if that's true, and I have not confirmed that to my satisfaction yet, but it is something that I've heard circulating, that Keith Olbermann actually posted this link to this information that it was the rebels that actually used the chemical weapons. So we really do not know exactly who has used them yet. And, you know, our government through Secretary John Kerry and even President Obama himself is saying that, you know, we've got very solid evidence that it was the Assad regime in Syria. And I don't know if we really know if that's true, because we have not waited. We've not got the results from the UN weapons inspectors, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of questions about exactly what has happened yet.
Yes, and all over the country, people are calling for our government to not take this action, and we are pleased that Congress is also considering that. In fact, there was a local action this past Saturday near MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, and more than 100 attended there. So all over the country, people are rising up and speaking. We don't want to just jump into another action like we did in Iraq. So more about that.
For our next segment, we're going to feature an interview that I did with Bill Bianchi from Progressive Democrats of America of John Nichols. And John Nichols is the Nation magazine's Washington correspondent. He's also a commentator on MSNBC radio programs, and he's the associate editor of the Capital Times in Madison, Wisconsin. And he's also authored or co-authored 8 books. His latest book is Dollarocracy, great book. And his previous book to that, which I'm looking at right now, is Uprising, How Wisconsin Renewed the Politics of Protest from Madison to Wall Street. We've got a 13-minute interview with him, and it's a very interesting perspective on on how minor constituencies and the major parties affect the major parties and then their appeal to the voters. And it's a very interesting interview. We're going to roll this, and it's 13 minutes, approximately 30 seconds, and then we'll be back with you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Bianchi. I'm with Progressive Democrats of America, and we're here in Madison, Wisconsin, talking to journalist John Nichols. And I won't go into the rest of it. You guys are going to edit this, right?
Sure.
Okay, good. All right. And John, one of the things you were talking about today, I heard you say, I was outside, so I didn't hear everything, but you said that PDA is on the fringe of the Democratic Party. I believe that's what you said.
I said absolutely.
Okay, would you like to expand on that and tell me what you mean by that?
You know, both political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, have groupings that are very pure, that really are kind of go to the heart and soul issues. And in the Republican Party, you find this with many libertarian Republicans who really, whether you agree with them or not, they are deeply sincere about their position. Similarly, I think in the Democratic Party, in parallel is PDA, a group that is really sincere about its commitment to the, I think, you know, some of those core values that you trace back to Franklin Roosevelt or Harry Truman, of a deep, deep commitment to labor rights, to civil rights, to a vision of economic and social justice that many people associate with the Democratic Party, but in fact is not at the heart of the Democratic Party. And that's what I mean about this fringe thing. It's an important concept to understand. It doesn't mean fringe as in irrelevant, or fringe as in silly, or fringe as in forget about those folks. What it means is that the core of both political parties has become so drenched in money. It is so defined by the pursuit of campaign money that they tend to jettison an awful lot of principles in order to pursue that money. And we've certainly seen it in the Republican Party, but we've also seen it in the Democratic Party. What makes PDA distinct, I think, is that it refuses to make those compromises. And it holds true, I believe, to many of the values and the ideals that that core Democrats historically held very dear. And so I think PDA is a very unique group, a distinct group in the Democratic Party because of that.
Let me ask sort of a double-barrel question related to this. The Democratic Party, where do you see it in relation to the American people? What is who are they representing? And then where are we, PDA, in relation to the American people?
Well, that's a very good question, because the Democratic Party at this point is, you know, if we look at voting patterns in the highest turnout elections, the Democratic Party is much closer where the American people are than the Republican Party. Barack Obama won the presidency in 2012 by more than 5 million votes. He had an electoral college landslide, got 51% of the vote to around 47% for Mitt Romney, which is a very substantial win. Obama's percentage of the vote in 2012 was higher than John Kennedy in 1960, Richard Nixon in 68, then Ronald Reagan in 1980, when people said Reagan had a transformative win, than either of Bill Clinton's victories, and in fact bigger than George Bush's victories. And so Barack Obama got a very high percentage of the vote in the scheme of things. But I would suggest that to some extent that vote was people saying, you know, look, I certainly don't want Mitt Romney to be president, so this is the alternative we take. The difference with PDA is that it does not suggest that it just wants to be an alternative, you know, like the better alternative to the Republicans. PDA suggests that the Democratic Party ought to be a principled party that really stands for a host of very strong, bold positions, rooted in economic and social justice, civil rights traditions, anti-war traditions, and so that's very different than what the Democratic Party, I think, presents at elections. Now, elements of what PDA stands for will turn up in a Democratic platform, but not as often in Democratic governance. And so this becomes the complexity, and it's a great complexity in American politics. Do parties reflect the principles that people associate with them, or are they merely election vehicles? Are they merely vehicles to win elections? And what I find fascinating about PDA, and I think significant, is that PDA suggests it's possible to be principled, to really stand for ideals, and to win elections. And so take a look at who's associated with PDA. Keith Ellison, congressman from Minnesota, the first Muslim in Congress. John Conyers, the senior African-American member of the U.S. House of Representatives, the only person Martin Luther King Jr. ever endorsed for President of the United States. Mark Pocan, new congressman from Wisconsin, openly gay man, who's a big labor activist. Donna Edwards from out in Maryland, who's a great campaigner for women's rights and for civil rights, for voting rights. And you start to see that the people who've associated with PDA, Jim McGovern up in Massachusetts, a congressman who's been literally the leader in Congress on hunger issues, but also Raul Grijalva, the great labor and progressive leader from Arizona, great on immigration rights and other issues. You know what we're starting to see here is that you've got a quite diverse, quite remarkable pattern of people who associate with and respect PDA and who win elections, sometimes in tough situations, in a principled way, in an honorable way.
Where do you think we are in terms of the American people, in terms of what they want?
I think the American people want something that is far more progressive than what the Democratic Party presents at most elections. And to my mind, on a host of issues closer to where PDA is, let's take an example of single-payer health care, Medicare for all. It's something that PDA is very, very pure on, very, very deeply committed to. And look at the polling. The fact is, if you describe single-payer Medicare for all health care, if you say, would it be better to reform our healthcare system instead of, giving more money to insurance companies and making all sorts of bureaucracy? If we just extended Medicare to everybody, huge numbers of Americans think that's a great idea. So, that is your position, and in fact, I think it's a wise one. But you see, this is something that I think many progressives lose sight of. They think that they're standing for, really noble ideas, and that these ideas are, maybe a little too pure to win elections. Quite the opposite. I think one of the reasons that we often have close elections in the United States is because the political parties are too close. Right. And so it becomes personalities, and it becomes, a battle over minutiae sometimes. When a battle between pure ideals, between real stances on the issues, it becomes very telling. And I'll give you a good example. When was a time when we really had that? Let's take the example of 1964. Barry Goldwater, who I have great respect for. Barry Goldwater won the Republican nomination for president as a pure conservative, a real true believer conservative. Lyndon Johnson was running for re-election as president. He had not been the greatest player historically, but he's running as supporter of civil rights, of voting rights, of a war on poverty, of a really different vision of the United States, going to the core of fundamental issues and addressing the inequities both of race and class in this country. What happened? Lyndon Johnson gets over 60%.
Yeah.
So it wins every state, just about every state, except for some southern states in Arizona. And so all I'm telling you is, don't lie to yourself and think that the only politics that wins is politics of compromise. In my opinion, a politics of principle has far more potential to achieve things, and that is what PDA says to the Democratic Party, and it has gotten quite a few members of Congress and others who've come to agree with that view. Similarly, we have libertarian friends who say that to the Republican Party. But here's the interesting dynamic. Then, once we sorted that through and say that maybe politics of principle is good for either party, then you ask, well, what ideas are right? What ideas are good? And what ideas really will, I think, have a positive impact for America? And the bottom line is this. In this great struggle between austerity and human values, between the people who say, oh, you just got to cut, you got to have less government and all that, and human values that say, no, we should use our government to make sure that we're all prosperous and that we have education, health care, access to real opportunity in this country. I think that's a far more appealing message. So to my mind, I wish that both parties would go to their purest positions, run on who they are, have a real choice there. And my sense is that a Democratic Party that was more reflective of PDA would be a very
winner.
Yeah,
well, that's music to our ears.
Party.
Let me ask you to put your prediction hat on here for a minute. We've seen the explosion in Madison. We saw the Chicago teacher strike and Occupy, of course. These things kind of pop up, and they always take us by surprise. or at least to take me by surprise. Maybe you,
all of
maybe you
us.
saw all
We
that.
all get surprised.
What would you say, where we might find the next explosion
Yeah, sure.
on the left?
But it already happened. And it's actually, it's ripping across this country with incredible success. Unfortunately, we don't have the media that covers politics and real things that happen. What's happening is amazing. 16 states have called for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. 500 communities across this country, cities as big as Los Angeles, small, the most rural towns out in even very red states, have called for a constitutional amendment to say corporations aren't people, money is not speech. The fact of the matter is we have a right as citizens to create a politics that is fair and that allows everybody's voice to be heard, not to be shouted down by big money. This movement is huge, and it's growing exponentially. And we need to talk about it. We need to recognize that it's out there and say that if we look across the history of the United States and say, where have there been great movements? This is one of them. It's happening right now. And unfortunately, still too many people in the Democratic Party and even in liberal circles are sort of dismissive of it. We couldn't possibly do that. Well, at what point do you start to respect the people? At what point do you say, wow, they've done 16 states, they've done 500 communities, and they're on the march, they're doing more and more all the time. Maybe we ought to say, there's something big happening here. This is a significant demand for the people for a different and better politics. So I see that as a real explosion,
Right.
And I think it's happening every day.
Great. Final question. 2014.
Yeah.
What do you see as the opportunities? What are the challenges? And where do you think PDA might fit in and make a difference?
2014 is going to be an election about austerity. Simple thing. It's the bottom line reality. Now, we're going to have a lot of other issues that are very much in play. The assault on voting rights. I think that's going to energize a lot of people. They're going to be like, wow, I better go vote because there's people threatening these things. The assault on students and young people with this terrible stumbling by Congress on the student loan and debt issues, and a host of other real important issues. These are concerns that should be discussed. But at the heart of this all, I think, is going to be the question of, do you want a Congress, and do you want state governments that will balance budgets by cutting. At the federal level, by cutting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, shutting down or undermining the post office, making all these brutal cuts. At the state level, by cutting funding for education, cutting funding for our communities. Or do we want to re-embrace the models of Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman and Lyndon Johnson and other presidents who had very successful domestic administrations?
Okay, that is our interview with John Nichols. We're cutting it just slightly short to fit the interview in with the bottom of the hour. We're going to be coming back with interviews with Dr. Cornel West and Jesse Jackson, short interviews with them, and a lot of other things here on the second half of Spectrum 360. We'll be back in about 5 minutes after some news and weather and all that kind of stuff, and we'll be back with more interviews and also...
interview with General Baker. Yes, that's his name. He's with the United Auto Workers, and we will be talking to him about labor today, as it is Labor Day. Thank you again, Spectrum 360.
When I'm with you, it doesn't matter where we are.
Here's good news. The Tan Talk Radio Network is hiring. We're hiring sales representatives both inside and out. Work at the stations or work from home. If you're in Dade City, Zephyr Hills, Wesley Chapel, Clearwater, or anywhere in Tampa Bay, call Downtown Dave now at 727-424-4991. That's 424-4991. Call now and join the sales staff of the Tan Talk Radio Network. Work in person or telemarket. Become a sales rep of Tan Talk Radio by calling Downtown Dave now at 727-424-4991. 424-4991. Call Downtown Dave today. Start work tomorrow at the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Out of work? Call now, 727-424-4991. 727-424-4991.
We're talking today to the founder and chairman of Wi-Fi Wireless, Inc. He's telling us all about Wi-Fi Wireless.
Cities need to have their own networks. So we've come up with a program called Wi-Fi My City. and we partner with municipalities to where we come in, we bring in the right engineers and the right equipment, and we get the network up and running properly. We hope to be the first company that can change the stigma of Wi-Fi not working properly throughout a city network. We are listed on the OTC, and our symbol is WFWL.
WFWL. You can check out the information at WiFiWirelessInc.com. And again, Gene, let's tell them how to find out about the stock.
They can just go to the symbol WFWL. It's on the over-the-counter market, WFWL.
Okay, well, thanks for talking to us. Good luck to you. It's very exciting what's going on.
Mr. Murray,
Yes,
I'm calling you from Egypt. How are you?
from Egypt. And how
I'm
is
calling
it?
you from Egypt.
And how are things in Egypt?
Egypt is great. We're chanting Buddy, 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 Buddy.
Oh, how nice.
We love your program over here. We love it.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. From Egypt, no less. How about that?
The Buddy Verde Show, big band music every Saturday afternoon from 1 until 3 here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
WTAN, Clearwater, Tampa Bay. WDCF, Dade City, Tampa Bay. WZHR, Zephyr Hills, Tampa Bay. Listen.
Hi, this is John Austin, host of the Book Club on the Tan Talk Radio Network. And I've been telling you about a book that can change your life. The book is No Cash, No Problem by Dave Wagenford, who is one of the greatest barter experts in the world, and his co-author, Ali Pervez. Well, it turns out that a whole lot of people agreed with me. Just check out the reviews on Amazon, where the Kindle edition of the book has been #1 in its categories for the last 5 weeks. Do you want to remodel your house, but the cost is just too high? Or maybe there's an automobile that you have dreamed of owning, but thought you could never afford. This book will tell you how you can do both of these things, plus hundreds more with little or no cash, and without going into hock for the rest of your life. Maybe you're a business owner with a cash flow problem that leads to low or non-existent profits. Read this book and see how you can increase your cash flow and your profits by time-proven techniques. The book again is No Cash, No Problem, and you can buy it now on Amazon for less than $10 for the Kindle edition. Do yourself a big favor and buy it today.
Are you looking for some great restaurants? For some great wines? Where are the great chefs? Listen to Dine Out Radio, heard every Wednesday on the Tan Talk Radio Network. 12 to 1 p.m., we'll tell you where all the great events are. We'll have Food and Wine Magazine and Bon Appetit Magazine. We'll have their editors and writers on each month. And maybe we'll throw in a couple surprises. Check out the website, diningoutradio.com.
My bridges all.
Tom O'Brien is on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Every Monday through Friday from 4 till 5 p.m., Tom takes to the airwaves as he breaks down the day's market action. Tom combines his technical knowledge of the markets with his years of trading experience to take your calls and questions every market day from 4 to 5 p.m. Whether you're new to trading or an active day trader, don't miss out on the Tom O'Brien Show live on the Tan Talk Radio Network from 4 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday.
From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.
Yes, welcome back to Spectrum 360.
Yes, Spectrum 360. This is our inaugural show. It's the first edition ever.
Don't they call that Virgin Show? I don't know. Well,
I don't think I want to go there with that.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's the first program. It's our very first program. So it's the premiere episode of Spectrum 360. And we're proud of that, and we're glad to be here serving you on WTAN. And we have more content here for you, more good interviews. When we were attending the March in Washington for Jobs and Freedom, which was last weekend, and not this Labor Day weekend, but the weekend before, August 24th on Saturday, was the reenactment of the March in 1963. And there were a lot of people there hanging out. There were a lot of people in the march. I covered the march, and at the front of the march, there was Reverend Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Martin Luther King III, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, who I believe is the Democratic minority leader for the U.S. House of Representatives. I can't remember. He's either the whip or the minority leader.
I always like that word whip.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah,
Anyway, one day we'll talk about that. That's just a strange word.
Yeah, it is strange. There are definitely some strange terms used in in Washington. But anyway, there were a number of people there, and also there was Cornel West. We were lucky enough to get a couple of interviews while we were in Washington. They're very brief. One with Cornel West and one with Jesse Jackson, the noted civil rights activist who was with Martin Luther King when he was shot in Memphis in 1963. And the interviews were done in a very crowded area with a lot of people talking, so I apologize that they might be a little bit difficult to hear, but we'll play them, and then we'll talk about them a little bit afterwards so that you can know what was being said, and we'll do a little bit of exposition on them. So this is Dr. Cornel West.
I met you at Freedom Plaza in the occupation with my car. I'd love to have you on our show. It's an AM talk station. It's rebroadcast in 4 of the stations around Florida. My quick question for you is, when we were talking about dream deferred, can you tell us how we're going to be able to redefine or re-emphasize King's message when it comes to poverty and ending war?
You know, that's what I was talking about. We're going to talk about empire, we're going to talk about poverty, we're going to talk about Wall Street, we're going to talk about oligarchs, we're going to talk about plutocrats, we're going to talk about the great tradition of black people. We raise our voices and tell the truth in the name of dignity, linked to self-respect, self-defense, and self-determination. That's where we come from.
Wonderful, thank you.
And that was Cornel West, who I had the privilege of talking to. I've met several times. Actually,
Dr. Cornel West.
Yes, Dr. Cornel West. Interesting story about that is when I was at the occupation at Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C. during the Occupy movement, participated with him in a action. A number of us marched to the Supreme Court and actually occupied the Supreme Court steps, which is not the easiest thing to do. And people were arrested, including Dr. Cornel West. And so I had the privilege of sharing in a civil disobedience act with Dr. Cornel West, and that was really exciting.
Yes, I was there at that action with October2011.org, but I believe that happened after I left because I was just there for the few days there that
yes, it did.
That started at the first 3 days. So I was one of the first 600 people into Freedom Plaza, but there were other people that came and took over and were there longer than I was, and that happened after I left, and I really regret that I wasn't there for that.
It was awesome. It really was, and he's a brilliant man, and it's a shame that he at times is snubbed by some of the leaders in the movements, because he takes a very clear radical stance and says a very clear opinion in relation to his views on the current administration and how it's behaving in many ways contrary to the very message of Dr. King that our own president spoke at the same place that King spoke this past Wednesday. And I find it kind of almost an interesting contradiction that he was up there speaking while planning this invasion or bombing of Syria, if you will, and Dr. King was a man of peace.
The speech itself was very good, and the rhetoric and the delivery I thought was very good. But yeah, there are other factors, there are other things going on in the world that are sometimes seemingly contradictory. But the speech itself was good, and I was interested that Cornel West, he talked about basically the effect that the 1% is having on the 99% in this country. He talked about plutocrats. I love the way he says that. Plutocrats and oligarchs and Wall Street bankers. So there we go. It's the same list of usual suspects. And then he speaks about the fact that black people have a tradition of respecting themselves and getting involved and taking responsibility and taking action, just like Dr. King did. And I support that. And it was very interesting talking to him about these kind of issues. Bruce, do you have any other comments before we go to the other interview?
Just it was an honor to, again, meet him. He's an amazing man, and I really believe that he has some powerful messages to say. I really find him much more in the tradition of Dr. King, of all the leaders that are out there, and powerful speaker. We also have some very important comments, I think, too, from Reverend Jesse Jackson, which Mark is queuing up, and we're going to go ahead and play that real quickly. And while that quick interview is going on, I'm going to try to get a hold of our union guest, General Baker. And he's
not a military general. That's just his name.
That's his actual name, and he's a really neat guy, and I expect that we're going to have a wonderful interview with him.
Yes, we hope that he will call in. We're having a little bit of apparently technical difficulty in getting him on the air, but we hope to still have him on the air in the program tonight. So we will go to our short interview with Jesse Jackson. I do apologize. It is a little bit difficult to hear Jesse Jackson. He was in a big crowd of people. He was being mobbed, actually. We were in Washington, D.C. at Busboys and Poets, which is an interesting restaurant, which did donate food to the October 2011.org demonstration in Freedom Plaza in October of 2011. Very interesting. And that was very fun to be there at Busboys and Poets, which supported our demonstration of a couple of years ago. And then here was Jesse Jackson and Cornel West, and they were treated like rock stars there at the restaurant. It was rather interesting. And it was the first time I had met either of them in person. And they were very personable, but they were mobbed, and there was a lot of people there. It was very noisy. I do apologize. We will explain exactly a little bit more of what Jesse Jackson said after we play his comment.
Talk show and talk radio in Florida. Home with the unfortunate situation of what happened with the Trayvon Martin family, as you know all too well. How do you think today King's message can be re-emphasized when it comes to race, class, and ending war?
One, we always talk about religious violence and the women of the problem. 136 blacks unarmed killed last year. That's a lot of security guards. So it was a critical mass where the Department of Justice to investigate. Thank you.
Yes, so there you have a brief interview with the Reverend Jesse Jackson, former presidential candidate with the Democratic Party for the presidency of the United States way back in the 80s. And what he basically said, and let me just reiterate this because it was difficult to hear him in the interview, and I do apologize for that. We did the best we could in a huge crowd of people where they were being mobbed like rock stars. Basically what his comment was, that in 2012 there were 136 black people killed by firearms that were unarmed themselves. They were murdered with guns. And he's advocating for the Justice Department to investigate just the general situation with black people being killed by other people with guns, and why there's 136 of them in 1 year. So that was his comment. I thought it was rather telling. And he did tie it also to the recent the killing of Trayvon Martin and the subsequent trial of George Zimmerman. And he tied it to the fact that these are becoming common, and there was so much attention put on that case nationally and here in Florida, since it did happen in the Orlando area in Sanford. So those were some comments that he actually tied to the recent events, such as the Trayvon Martin death, et cetera, et cetera. Bruce, do you have any comments on that?
I wanted to say our guest is on the line, so I want to give him as much time as we can.
Very good. Very good.
I wanted to just say that you'll be hearing more interviews like this in the future. Tonight, though, as it is Labor Day, and far too often labor issues are not discussed by the mainstream press anymore, and in fact, union busting is happening in a big way, both by the government itself and by big corporations. I thought it'd be important to hear from people that are involved in the labor movement. Well, our guest tonight, just to give you a brief introduction, his name is General Baker, and as we said before, that's his name. Maybe he'll have an interesting story to share about that. He's with the
we have to salute?
No, we don't. He was for many years with the United Auto Workers, actually 40 years. He was also an organizer at one time of the League of Black Revolutionary Workers.
Would you say that again?
Yes, the League of Black Revolutionary Workers. And he's also a member of the League of Revolutionaries for a New America, and has been a long-time civil rights activist, as well as one of the first African Americans to refuse the draft during the Vietnam era and during the Vietnam War, and was involved in the uprisings that happened in Detroit around union and other civil rights kinds of issues in 66 and 67.
What a history.
Yes, what a history. And without further ado, I do want to bring General Baker on the line. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Bruce. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, good to hear from you. What some of the audience doesn't know is that my comrade here, General Baker, and I are both involved with the League of Revolutionaries for New America. We've known each other for some time, and been involved in all kinds of revolutionary action and organizing. And
now,
so,
how long has that organization been in existence, and how did it originate?
Well, let's ask General Baker that, and then he can maybe share some about his experiences working in the unions.
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. The League of Revolutionaries for a New America has been in existence about 15 years now. And we have a long history of coming out of the struggles of the 60s and 70s and carrying our message on as conditions changed. I spent 40 years in the auto industry, and I'm based in Detroit, Michigan. This Labor Day message I would like to try to give you is a cry to organize, organize, organize. I mean, yes. I don't know if people realize how bad conditions have got for labor, but in the private sector in the United States, only 6% of workers in the private section are unionized, which is absurd. I remember when I first hired in and went into the trade union movement back in the 60s, we were 30% of the private sector was unionized. It then fell to 6% and it's fallen daily.
Yes.
Not only is it fallen based on attacks from corporations, but we're faced on different attacks from state governments, federal government, and what have you. Here in the state of Michigan, just last year, we were voted into a right-to-work state. Now, Michigan, that was the home of the trade union movement, had always been known for its strong union activity, were defeated, by a Republican administration in a lame duck session after the 2012 election, and they went ahead and imposed right-to-work legislation, and they done it in such a way that they tied appropriations to it, so we couldn't involve ourselves in any kind of petitioning to try to change the law.
Well, yes, and as well, there was the emergency manager law that was passed, I believe, at the same time, where
Certainly.
an emergency...
We had emergency manager law passed
it's...
at the same time. Now, the emergency manager law is kind of a new phenomenon that's been on operated in Michigan for the last 10 years. This emergency manager can pretty much do anything. He's appointed by the governor. He can come in. He can remove your elected officials. He can cancel your city council, cancel your mayor. He can make all kind of laws. He can sell the different assets of the cities. They pretty much can devastate, the cities at the whim of the governor.
Yes, it's the destruction of local democracy, and I've been very concerned about that. That is a very anti-democracy law, and it's the very thing that we fought World War II to prevent, and now it's being done by our own government. I've been very, very concerned about that.
Yes, it has. And here in Detroit, we're kind of the epicenter of this. But we got 7 cities in the state of Michigan that's under this law already. We got Benton Harbor.
Yes,
Flint,
Benton Harbor.
Pontiac,
I remember that case.
Muskegon Heights, Hamtramck, Allen Park, and this Ecorse, and it's growing all the time. And all of these cities have been stripped, of all of their democratic rights at a time when their economic rights are being shut down. You got to remember that with the GM and Chrysler bankruptcy in 2008, we lost an awful lot. The Pontiac car is gone. It no longer exists. That was built in Pontiac, Michigan. Well, Pontiac, Michigan is one of the cities that's been taken over by the emergency manager. The Oldsmobile car is gone. That was built in Lansing, Michigan. It's gone. The Buick facilities that was a home in Flint, Michigan. Only one plant left in Flint, Michigan. One Buick plant left, and now GM is down to Cadillac and Chevrolet and a few truck production.
And isn't Buick also being produced in China? I know they're being sold heavily in China, but aren't they also being produced there as well in a factory there?
Yes, they are. They have a special Buick edition that's built in China. And matter of fact, Buick is one of the best sellers in China right now.
Yes, that's what I understand.
So we got a real crisis here in Detroit.
Yes.
You got to understand this auto industry. We call it an economic revolution that's taking place in industry. And when we say that, we mean that the new technology, the robots and computerization inside the shop is wiping out the use of human labor. Currently, the auto industry we used to have almost 1.5 million members in the UAW, and now we're down to about 300,000. Wow. The auto production this year, if you read the newspapers, is up about 15.8 million, going up to about 16 million before the year is over. The maximum production was back in '67 at 17 million cars and trucks sold. They're going to hit peak production this year with 100,000 less workers.
Yeah, so the productivity of the workers individually has gone way up, and yet the middle class is being devastated.
The profit of the auto industry gone way up.
Yes.
Now that's just a look at the auto industry. The one that shocked me was when I was reading the article in Wall Street Journal about the Hostess Corporation that went out of business last November, making the famous Twinkie. Well, the new Hostess Corporation came back on in July. The old Hostess Corporation had 19,000 employees. The new Hostess Corporation got 1,900 employees. Wow. And they're going to hit maximum production that the old company produced by November. So they're making all of these Twinkies with 1/10 of the amount of workers that they had before.
Yeah,
so when we talk about this question of a jobless recovery, it's overwhelming. You know, it's a recovery for profitability for the corporations and nothing for the workers themselves.
So it was a Twinkie assault on the workers.
Well,
yes, it was. Yes, it was.
You know, it's interesting, General Baker, that we're sitting here talking about this when wasn't the promise of technology to be a time where it would make our lives easier, and yet what is happening is the jobs that are being created now, which ties in very much with the fast food workers walkouts, are temp labor, are low-wage workers, are service industry workers, and not production. We're becoming a country that doesn't produce anything.
And listen, they promised us when technology came in that the new problem we was going to have was going to be recreation problem.
Yes, leisure time. Yes.
We were going to have leisure time, and we were going to have so much time on our hands, we got to find something to do.
And now it's poverty time.
What happened with the new technology is that a section of the workers are working themselves to death, and the majority of us ain't got no work at all.
That's right, and
we're starving, and that's the picture that we're looking at everywhere. That was the message at our Labor Day march this morning here in Detroit. I mean, we got now under this emergency manager and this bankruptcy. You know, we got workers that have worked all their life and their pension is under attack. You know, where this emergency manager is coming in trying to use the bankruptcy laws in order to wipe out the pensions and health care of all of these workers that have worked all over the years here in the city of Detroit.
And Mr. Baker, what do you think are the solutions to these problems, and what action are you taking now to address these problems and improve the situation for workers?
Well, what we're doing is educating. We got to educate. Workers don't necessarily understand what's happening to them. We're trying to educate them and teach them what's happening. We have to change the nature of this system. As long as production is made for profit, we're going to continue to get sold aside and slumped aside as the profiteers continue to take everything that we got. They go after every piece of money that exists. Every time they see a pension fund that's viable, they go after it. Healthcare funds, they go after it. We're just under assault by this capitalist class in this country. And unless we can stand up and see the difference in where we're going, we're going to continue to get squashed and sent back. We call it a race to the bottom. Right now, half of the new auto workers going into the shop are making only $15 an hour, and you're working next to a guy that's making $28 an hour.
Yes, understood. I'm aware of that.
As the new tier turns over, more and more workers are thrown into a pension situation that's under attack, and new workers are coming in at half the rate of the old workforce.
Wow.
So our cry is organize, organize, organize. Teach to understand the nature of this system. We have given in the Capitol on everything they asked for. Every time we had a crisis and the corporations come and promise us, we're going to give you some jobs if you give up these taxes. Every time we've done that, we lost. We give up the taxes, and they give us a job for a few years, and then they're gone. Over and over again. That's the history of Detroit. We still got the Packard plant sitting up here in Detroit. The last Packard ran off the line in 1955, and we still got this old, dilapidated piece of a building called the Packard facility sitting in the middle of the neighborhood. It just shows you the devastation. Capital
from
not only attacks
1955,
its workers, but it attacks society itself.
And
that building is from 1955.
You know, and
1955, the last car ran off the line.
Wow. It's truly tragic too. You know, I remember going up there a few years ago for the U.S. Social Forum with Sherry and the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign March, and just seeing the devastation in Detroit. And you know, it's happening in major cities throughout the country, but looking at Detroit, the home of the so-called middle class, where so many people rose from the ranks of the poor, particularly people in the African community, and now we're having a situation where people are barely surviving. Final comment, if you would. It's just been a pleasure having you on, and I know we'll have you on again, and at some point, of course, have your wife on, which that's a whole nother story. But final comment, if you would.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think, like I was crying, we got to organize, teach. We got to teach as we go, because workers, everywhere we go, workers don't understand the level of the crisis that they're in. They think that this thing is temporary and they're going to return, to the promised land. It's not going that way.
Understood.
And, so our effort is to use as much propaganda and education as possible to teach workers which way we got to go, Bruce.
Well, General Baker,
that's our message here on Labor Day today.
General Baker, thank you so much for the interview. Thank you for appearing on our premiere edition of Spectrum 360.
Thank you.
Good night.
And
good night.
I've got a treat of a little bit of audio that relates directly to the United Auto Workers. I'll explain in just a moment. That is the United Auto Workers Region 5 members in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, the 24th of September, during the reenactment of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. A little bit of audio there from our Washington, D.C. chip. And this is ending our first inaugural premiere edition. How many other ways could I say it?
I don't know.
Of Spectrum 360. Thank you for being with us. You've heard from Cornell West, from Jesse Jackson, from General Baker, and from a number of other sources as well. Tune in next week on Monday at 11 p.m. for more Spectrum 360.
Yes, and you can reach us at Bruce at stpeteprogressives.org, or you can call 727-278-1547. It's been a pleasure being on the WTAN Spectrum 360. Expect more from us.
WTAN, Clearwater, Tampa Bay. WDCF, Dade City, Tampa Bay. WZHR, Zephyr Hills, Tampa Bay. Listen.